Adults are trained.
Hey, Composing Gloves here, and this is the video on the sampler channel or SMP channel in FL Studios. If you are unfamiliar with it, prepare to get familiar with it. If you have wondered about what a couple buttons do, this may have some stuff you are interested in. So, okay, right off the bat, you can open this up simply by just dragging a file on here. I could just drag a file and boom, there it is. There's the sample. Or you can come over here, go to Sampler, and it pops up. I know I did that kind of fast. You click the plus button down there and you go to Sampler and you can load it in there, and you could be a weird, freaky guy who only loads your samples that way. You'd be friggin' weird. You get even weirder by going to File, and you can come in here, click that, and you can open up a file this way. So I open it up and it will load my sample. If I want to know where this sample is, another thing that's cool about this is if you click it, it will open up your sample where it's at if you just loaded it. At least I believe that's how it works. Let's test it. Yep, it will. So there you go. There's that. And then if you want to know, like, hey, I want to know where it is in my browser over here, you just click this little browser. This is the browser icon. You notice it's up here too. It looks a little different, but here it is. Hey, look at that. There it is. Now I can go. Maybe I have stuff near it that I know where stuff is. Then I could go there and do that. If I want to remove my sample, it says up here, remove sample. If you want to remove it, up there in the corner, you got to click this little X and it will remove it. So you got no file now. You just come back in here and put it back. There we go. So we have content. Now there's this option here, keep on disk. Some of you may know what this is. Some of you may not. So keep on disk only really works when, it only really matters. Let's talk about that. It only matters when you have a file size that is huge. Like you need it and you want to, it will speed up your load time of really big file sizes. It only works with 16-bit and 32-bit WAV. At least that's what it says in the manual. It doesn't really work with MP3 or OGG, anything compressed. And it precludes, whatever that means, the use of pre-computed effects. Basically what it does is FL Studios uses memory allocation to do it, to work as fast as it does. And so by changing the way it prioritizes the memory, I know this is like, I'm really bringing it down for people who just don't know about this kind of stuff. And I'm not like some sort of expert anyway, so it's like whatever. It'll make those things faster, but you won't be able to do things that you would typically be able to do. Like, it's not supposed to be able to use these effects. Now, like, here's a counter example that I felt like was a pretty good thing. I've got this file size here. It's a vengeance file thing. And look at that. I could do it even though I turn that option on. So it's interesting. I don't know if it takes effect when I load or what it is, but I hardly ever use this option. But in case you're like wondering, and this is an important thing to you, I'm not claiming like correct information here. All I'm claiming is that it's a thing and that it may be of use to you. If you're like, hey, I'm running like a crappy laptop that's like barely working with this, then this could be an option that could save you a lot of stuff. So yeah, so moving on. I'm not going to like dwell on this. So we have load regions. So you notice that this one has these slice markers. I've saved it with, these are called regions. They save the tempo data at the transients. Well, it depends on how you save them. But anyways, you can insert these a variety of different methods, and some samples have them. They are very useful as they will now stretch to match whatever your tempo is. So if I do not include load regions, you see that it shifts a little bit. It goes back to its original tempo, which I believe is 128. So like load regions, it'll shift to be correctly matched so that when I drag and drop it into my project file, it'll load at 130 instead of 128. These things will land on the beat now. So that's what load regions does. So if your file is like sounding weird or clicky or something like that, then you may want to disengage this to get rid of the clicks. For rhythmic stuff, it usually works out really well. Yeah, this resample option. You notice that resample is not available for me. Resample is a thing. Go watch my digital audio basic series if you really want to know what this is. But anyways, you have your sample session audio here. So you see whatever it is you're doing with your sample sessions, 44.1 for me, blah, 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 blah. And what this does is it will... if it's at like a different one, let's say it's 88.2, or for some reason you did something really weird and recorded at like 10K or something just freaky, then you can resample it to your current project tempo. However, if you do this, you may experience clicking. So you may need to deal with clicking because your samples will land on weird spots. Load acid markers is basically the same thing as load regions. However, acid markers Sorry about that. Acid markers is just like another company made it or whatever. I'm not really sure what the deal is. To me, it's the same thing as load regions, but I have regions and not acid markers. So it's like a separate thing. I believe it has something to do with file types too. Someone in the comments will comment their great knowledge on the subject. Declicking, what is that all about? Well, let's go ahead and look at it. I'm so glad you asked. I'm going to detach this. Okay, so here we see I have my file, and then it cuts, and this could like click because it lands on a sample that is not silent. So what I could do is I could go, so no bleeding is basically just chops off, like ends right there. Transient bleeding. So these are all basically just different options for controlling this bleed right here. So I could come down here and let's open up this. Sorry about that. I'm looking at the wrong file. I'm like, why isn't it working? Okay, so no bleeding. Then we can come over here. Look at that. Ooh, we get a little bit of bleeding, and you see it fades out. It shows you really nicely. And we have some longer ones, generic bleeding, smooth. So we have a longer bleed. So this could be very useful for getting rid of clicks and pops that you may be having. Thus the name declicking. I'm going to do time stretching in a part 2 video, so keep your eyes out for that one, because I feel like it's something people will look up by themselves. And then we have pre-computed effects. Here we go. This is really cool. So we have remove DC offset. So if you don't know what that is, go check out my FL12 effects series on the wave shaper. Remove DC offset is when the average sample, your samples aren't centered with their average on 0. And so you have an issue. And this is all going over your head. Digital audio basics, man. But anyways, this will recenter it. So it'll put it back on 0. Reverse polarity is basically it will flip your polarity, not your phase, your polarity, because phase is technically wrong. So anyways, it flips your polarity. So if it's positive, it's now negative, negative, now positive. They have normalize. So normalize is a really cool feature. A lot of things, this normalize button is kind of limited. It does exactly what you sort of think it does, but it'd be nifty if they had like a normalized plugin or something too. Why am I like talking about this weird normalized thing? Doesn't it? Because some of you probably just know that what it does is if you have things that do not reach their peak values, then you can hit normalize like I could do right here. And you see it got a little bit bigger. It's not very much. And what it's doing is it is stretching it so proportionally. So everything gets stretched proportionally. So you maintain your dynamic range, but you now take advantage of the maximum volume you have available to you. And so that's the idea behind normalize. However, what I'm saying is a lot of plugins are a little more featured in that you can select what the volume it stretches proportionally to is. And there's even additional features in some of them. So yeah, but for here, this serves perfectly well because then you could just turn down the volume and essentially control it like that. So that's like whatever. So it's kind of included. I need to drink water. Okay, so we have reverse. Reverse is your sample. Then you have this option called fade stereo. It makes it look a little weird. What does it do? Well, you click on it. It makes your waveform look kind of funky. What it does is it sounds like it comes from your left side to your right side now. Listen to that. Weird. Really cool option that a lot of people do not take advantage of very often. And then you have swap stereo. Guess what that does? That's right. Now you're going from your right to your left. And it looks like I'm pointing to my left because it's backwards because I'm recording. But I swear this is my right side in real life, not fake life. So anyways, that's a fade stereo, swap stereo. Very cool options for percussive samples too. Now you have these guys down here. This is in. It's basically a volume envelope. Look at that. It's got a fade in now, so it'll fade your audio in. Very easy to see. Now, one thing to note is it affects your entire sample. So if you want to do this for a particular, it's great for one-shot samples, but not good for loops. Same thing with out. So it fades it out like there's a volume envelope on it. So then you have Pogo. It is a pitch bending algorithm. So you could pitch bend it or pitch bend it. You notice that this one is more severe. I don't know if it's like, I don't know what the deal is. There's not like a lot of info about what this particularly does. It's mostly just touch it and see what happens. Because unless you're like some sort of weird wizard genius, having knowledge about the algorithm wouldn't affect decisions too much. But you see, it doesn't. This one, I think it keep the rhythm. The rhythm is the same. And on this direction, the rhythm is. It's the way they deal with tempo is the difference. So you see this one evens it out. This one like doesn't care at all. Okay, so this is what I think. I think this one stretches it so that this is stretched to correct, like stretches it like it would stretch a regular sample. And this one evenly spaces silence. I don't know what the deal is, okay? But anyways, you can see that there's a clear difference on the directions you can go. Next, we have crossfade. What does that do? Well, you have a region right here, as you can see, and this will crossfade it with and you see it looks kind of looks like a worm. As you turn it on, it will crossfade it with the end of your sample, wherever this thing is. So interesting. If we go to like another sample, like here, we can crossfade, and you see this one doesn't have regions, and so these things don't appear, but it still goes, it just assumes the end at this point. So it'll look at this. It'll bring the end in on it, and it will crossfade it in. We got a click there too, so you need to be aware of clicks. Okay, so this last one's trim. Now, trim won't work here because I have region markers. So I can choose not to load my regions. And then as I turn it on, you will know, well, okay, let's come over here because I still have these guys over here. Okay, so over here, if I turn my trim on, it'll get rid of the silence at the end of my clip. So here's some silence, it will get rid of it. If you have like markers and stuff, it doesn't work really. Okay, and now you have some loop options. Now, occasionally your loop options will not be available according to the way you opened up the sampler channel. What do you mean? Well, check out this. Here, I believe I just dragged and dropped it, and I don't have loop options. I don't know what the deal is. So what I did was I dragged it into a blank sampler channel. Now I've got loop options. I don't know what the deal is. That's weird. But anyways, you can turn it on and you lose loop points. Well, so if you have loop points embedded, you can use that like for here. And so to just keep going forever and ever and ever. So that's really nice. So these are my loop points. And then I have ping pong. Ping pong, as you can see, it changes the sample to show you what it's going to do forward. And then it reaches the midway point. It now goes backwards in reverse. Sometimes they'll have a little animation that just goes back and forth in some plugins. But, well, not them as in like FL Studio, but it's a common thing for ping pong. But if you turn it off, or if you turn it on, this is kind of nice. They show you a visual, and then it uses the loop marker. So it's going to play through this thing, and you see this. Once it plays through it forward, it'll play through it reversed. So that's that. That is the sampler channel. If you have any questions about the sampler channel, you should let me know. Additional cool options that you have. You can hit Control E and it will open up Edison for more advanced editing. Another cool thing you can do is you can go and right click on the sample data. It will open up a save as, so you can save it if you have done something weird to it or you want to preserve it. Then you have detect tempo. So if you don't know what the tempo is of your sample, you can come here and figure it out, and it will allow you to stretch it better later. Now, if you have a loop that was recorded at 110 beats per minute, and then you change it to some tempo like 120, for example, and you're going to mess up your loop. So you want to give it to the correct tempo that it was recorded at, so that when you stretch it, it can take it from that tempo and then move it proportionally. You don't want to start it at a weird tempo. You have get properties. This will open up a window to show you where it is on your computer. So it's kind of a nifty little thing right there if you really need to know. And then you have spectrum view, which will change it to a spectrum view. And if you were to put this down, if we were to put it down in spectrum view, look at that. Changes them all to spectrum view, which is kind of cool, kind of a nice look. However, it's not super useful. I prefer waveform view most of the time. You also have multi-channel waveform view. So if you have like, I'm not sure if this works for surround sound, but obviously it works for stereo. It'd be interesting to see surround sound file in here. I've never like checked that. But anyways, that is the thing as well. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.